Okay, so where we left off was we were planning and preparing and actually flying to our African safari. So on this video, I'm going to talk about our day one experience and start filling in the blanks of what it is like to go on safari. Um, so as you can see from this picture, we're looking out of our small Cessna plane that fits 4 people. And we're looking out on the Zimbabwe landscape because we've came in through Harare, a city in Zimbabwe, and we're now headed to an African bush camp called Bumi Hills, Bumi Hills. So if you look up Bumi Hills, you'll see a lot of great pictures about what it looks like, etc., and the story of Bumi Hills. But this was one of the photos that I took out of the plane. Now here we're actually now approaching the Bumi Hills, um, the lake that it sits on, and it sits on Lake Kariba, which is a man-made lake. It's huge. They built this reservoir many years ago, and it's really enormous. Okay. Now this lake has a lot of dead trees in it, which I will show you some pictures a little later on as we get through this, because we did do a boat tour on Lake Kariba, which is also considered a safari, right? Because you see animals on that too. Um, but um, it covers a lot of miles, and it's got a lot of dead trees in it because the water filled up very quickly in Lake Kariba. So they're sort of fossilized in place through whatever process. Okay. Um, and this is just some aerial photographs. Because one of the things that was interesting to me is that even, in this town, right, looks like a lot of the roads are not exactly paved. And we did experience that sometimes made roads are dirt roads, which is kind of interesting in terms of getting around and all that sort of thing. So you'll kind of see that through some of the photos that I took and videos that I took. And this is also an aerial landscape of Zimbabwe. Same thing. So you see we are starting to get into a hilly area of Zimbabwe. It's a beautiful, beautiful landscape. These trees aren't huge. They don't grow as tall as a lot of the trees that we experience in the United States, but still, it's a gorgeous place. Okay, and you can see here from this video a lot of these dead trees, those kind of little white dots right along the coastline there of Lake Kariba. Those little dots are dead trees. Okay. Now, this was our little Cessna plane. Uh, Now, one of the things to notice is that right in front of the plane, sort of right in front in this picture um, of the propeller in the front, you see a stick with a red tip um, sticking up from the ground. We learned over time that this airstrip is a dirt airstrip. It's not paved or anything. This little part right here is a little paved, but when you come off of that airstrip, you'll come into this little area here that they kind of have roped off, if you will, but that stick in the ground with the red thing on top of it, it's actually an electrified fence that goes around. Uh, I don't know if it was the same thing in Boomy Hills, but at the next camp that we went to, um, the guide told us that they had to do that on some airstrips because uh, the uh, the hyenas like to bite the tires of these airplanes, so they have to try and keep hyenas out. All right, so this is us getting off the little plane, and we're starting to go towards Boomy Hills. The very first animal we saw was an impala. And impalas are plentiful in Africa. There's quite a few of them. So if you don't see an impala herd when you're out on a safari drive, then something's wrong, right? Um, and then this is looking out from Boomy Hills towards the lake. And sometimes we would see elephant down there in kind of that flat area, right on the bank of the lake. And at first I was like, what are they? Because you're kind of far away. It doesn't seem like you are, but you are. And when I looked closer and zoomed in with my camera, I was like, oh, those are elephants. Okay. All right. Now, as you can see from Boomy Hills, it is very resort-like. It is, they're impeccable in their service. They're very thoughtful people. They are very well trained in the art of service. But this is, as I talk about these different camps, and our experience with African bush camps, they're an awesome company. I would highly recommend doing them there. There are a lot of camps and companies in Africa. We just so happened on our trip to just do African bush camps. That's all we did. But as you can see, they are beautiful, and they have different experiences. So as you see, when I talk about some of the different ones, you'll see that the experience, while it's the same, has some differences. Like this particular camp, if you will, had sort of a boundary to it. And it seemed like it was surrounded by an electrified fencing of some kind, which kept a lot of the larger animals out of it. So when we were at Boomy Hills, we were told we could walk around on the grounds during the day or at night, no problems, but still just kind of watch, because you never know when you might run across a snake or something like that, right? That is possible. But it doesn't keep all the animals out, because clearly we saw a couple of small antelope in there. And of course the insect varieties, and lizards and things like that. We saw those. But also they have the velvet monkeys that are flying through these trees at any given point in time. And so they're always hanging out. And so they were often in camp. And then went on my first game drive. So I had actually missed the start of the game drive. So another driver took me out to where the group was, and they were all looking at this herd of elephants that were down on those flat plains on the banks of Lake Kariba. And you see there's a fairly large herd hanging out, and there's some elephants in the background, and probably some zebra or something off in the far distance. And we were probably a good 50 feet, 60 feet from these guys. Sometimes a little closer. Sometimes he'd move the vehicle up to get a little closer look. So this was my first experience with elephants just doing their thing, right? And one of the things that I found fascinating that I learned on the first day was that these elephants are eating pretty much all day long. They're constantly eating the grasses and leaves off trees, things like that. And they don't digest as much as you would think. They said they only digest about 40% of what they eat. And so, they're constantly eating. And because they're constantly eating, too, they wear down their teeth over time. So they have the sets of molars, I believe it is, that they actually regrow these molars 6 times in their lifetime. So if elephants don't die of some other cause, like a disease or something, or getting attacked by uh, a lion or something like that, or some issue like that, or getting injured by another elephant, um, they will often die not too long after they've gone through that last set of molars because they only get six in a lifetime. So I thought that was really fascinating about elephants. And when they lose all those molars that sixth time, they don't grow back again, and so they will starve to death. Um, and one of the things I learned through the entire course of being on a safari is that safari guides do not impose themselves on the natural cycles of any animal. And so it's like if an elephant was discovered starving to death, it's very likely that the camp itself would not intervene with that process. Okay. And of course, I've gotten there late because of our immigration time that we spent getting into Zimbabwe. But just look at the beautiful golden hour coloring, you know, of these photographs are just fabulous, right? And so these elephants, my first foray into seeing them was just an amazing experience. There's a close up of this elephant. Um, and they're just like, whatever, we're doing our thing. Um, we saw elephants that had two tusks. We saw elephants that had one tusk. We saw every once in a while an elephant that had no tusks. Um, and there's some genetics where sometimes they're born without them. It's rare though. But a lot of times these break off. You'll see some photos that I have where they've broken off. And it's because they use them. They use these tusks for foraging and things like that, and fighting and things. Okay. All right. So, of course, these elephants you'll see in future photographs. They have really long eyelashes. They're gorgeous animals. Of course, they had different generations in the group, you know. So little ones that were between 3 to 6 months old, teenage elephants and older elephants. It's just wonderful. Now, on every game drive, whether it was in the morning or in the evening, they usually stopped somewhere and you would have snacks. In the morning, you would have coffee or tea. In the evening, you could have gin and tonic if you wanted it, that type of thing, or just soda or whatever they had. They might have beer with them or things like that. So, we were constantly eating. That was one of the uh, interesting things about your day on an African safari. Um, we would have breakfast in the morning, go on the game drive. Usually there were snacks, coffee, and tea on that. Then you come back for lunch. Before you went out on your evening game drive, you had a high tea or some snacks before you left. You would then have your snacks and your alcohol or whatever on the game drive, and then you had dinner when you got back. So, I mean, they take care of you in the food department. Um, and they had a mixture of some African dishes, but mostly it was sort of a European kind of diet, that they served. Okay. And more pictures of elephants. And you can see the sun is starting to set. Here was a little family of zebra. And there's might be more zebra right over there, right on the banks. Yeah. And of course, here's an impala and quite a few in the background there. And the impala and the zebra. And then, of course, you know, as you've probably seen, there's nothing like safari sunsets, right? They're just gorgeous. All right. So that was the first day. So not a huge amount of different kinds of animal sightings, but we would see a lot of these similar ones throughout this first day at this first camp. Um, so future days, it'll be going through each day and kind of what we experienced, because I honestly didn't think after uh, several days of doing African safari game drives, I thought nothing can get better than the ones we've already had. But each and every single different game drive, whether it was on a boat, whether it was in a vehicle, whether it was on foot, didn't matter. They were all different, you know. No one was better than the other. They were just all different, and they were whatever they were that day, or for that morning or that evening. Um, so we did probably in total, probably 25 game drives or game experiences, if you will, because we did them mostly through a vehicle, but sometimes on different things. And you'll see that as we go through each day. All right. Thanks a lot. And again, if you are interested in doing an African safari, I highly recommend Africa Dynamics. They're in Bellevue, Washington, and they're really good at what they do. They've been doing that for years, and they have really great camps to choose from. There are other companies that can do this, but they are one, and they're the ones that we used for our trip. All right. So thanks so much, and I will get back with you soon. Bye.